Welcome to the Latino podcast, where we discuss the intersection of law and our Latino communities with legal, political, and community leaders and visionaries. Let's get started.
Welcome, everyone, to the Latino podcast. Bienvenida to the Latino podcast. I'm John Gomez, your host. I'm a nationally recognized trial lawyer and civil rights leader. Our podcast addresses the connection between law and the Latino or Latinx community. And so we have thought leaders, lawyers, judges, legislators on here to talk about that topic and how things have happened in the past, how they happen today, and how they will be happening in the future. This episode is brought to you by your sponsor, Gomez Trial Attorneys. Gomez Trial Attorneys is a nationally recognized consumer rights law firm that specializes in personal injury, mass torts, employment litigation, and class action litigation on behalf of consumers exclusively. Gomez Trial Attorneys prides itself in providing language and cultural sensitivity, especially to our Latino clients. And so I'm super pleased to introduce our guest today. You're going to be hearing a lot from her, seeing a lot of her, because she will at times be hosting this podcast in my absence, and oftentimes will be my co-host, and that's Jessica Lujan. So Miss Lujan, how are you today?
Hey, John, I'm great. I'm really excited. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So tell our listeners a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I am a trial attorney here at Gomez Trial Attorneys. I help lead a fast-paced litigation trial team made up of 4 attorneys. I'm super honored to be here, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to tell everyone about my journey and how I got here.
Well, let's hear it. How did you get to us, Jessica?
Well, a little bit about my background. I grew up in the Ciudad Juárez, El Paso border. I was raised mainly in Juárez until 5th grade, and then that's when we came over to El Paso, Texas. But I went to school in El Paso every day. So I was every day in Juárez, and then I'd be in El Paso. I had friends at both places. And I grew up in a very traditional, conservative Mexican household.
What does that look like? What does that mean?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about it. Kind of brainstorming for this podcast, I was, remembering memories that were making me laugh, and at the same time just, be amazed at how much they've shaped who I am today. So my mom, very strong-willed Mexican woman. She definitely wears the pants in the household. And my dad, just a kind, little Mexican man with his big mustache, loves his family. He's a deacon in the Catholic Church, so religion was always a very important part of us growing up. So I lived in Juárez. I'm the oldest of 3 daughters, so always taking care of my sisters. Family is of utmost importance to us. And, visits to grandma. I remember going over to my grandma's house. She lived in El Barrio, and, I would hear all the gossip about all her little neighbor friends and the chisme. It was always just a fun thing to do. I grew up riding it's called the Ruta, which is the equivalent of, the city bus. But it's nothing like a city bus here. I mean, they break down in the middle of the street, and, you don't have seatbelts or anything. So it was just funny. We'd have to wait for it. And I remember that was always exciting for me, though. So it's not until now that I'm older that I'm like, oh my goodness, I wouldn't have liked that now.
That was a different kind of excitement.
Very different kind of excitement. But yeah, I'm a folklorico dancer. It's one of my favorite things in the world. I love folklorico dancing. I love mariachi. I have a Vicente Fernandez chante playlist on my phone that I, blast sometimes, and it definitely, brings back memories. But I was that kid because I said I went to school in El Paso, always. I don't know how my mom came up with that. She, one day said, I want my daughters to have better opportunities, so I'm going to cross the border every day. It would take, sometimes it would take an hour. Everybody's familiar with the bridge here. And it was the same in El Paso. So we get in the car. There was no Sentry pass or anything like that.
Right.
I'd be in my pajamas. She would change us at school. And I would get horribly car sick. So I just remember, hours on end of driving and driving, but I always went to school in El Paso, and that's how I learned English. And I vividly remember my first day of school, I didn't understand a word anybody was saying. I remember looking up at, they had the little alphabet, and looking at the little cards and seeing like, okay, that's an apple. And I remember the apple and the kite. And I remember my teacher standing there and just kind of feeling lost. But then one day, I guess it was all okay. I spoke English and it was fine. So, little things like that. I did the same to my daughter. So I guess I got to pay it forward, and she went through the same thing. But
what do you mean by that? She went through the same thing.
So when she was born, we only spoke Spanish to her. So she was born in San Diego, but I spoke Spanish to her. Her dad speaks mainly Spanish. So at her dad's house, she's 100% Spanish speaker. And I put her in preschool in English. And so she didn't know what anybody was saying, but she, didn't stop her. And now she's fully bilingual. There was one point where she didn't even realize it. So I remember someone was talking to her and they said, what did she say? And then she translated, and to her, English and Spanish was the same thing. Like, she didn't realize that there was a difference between the two languages. So it was very interesting to see.
And so, there's a lot of, as we know, families, there's people that cross every day to work. There's a ton of kids that cross, to attend school. And like you said, was it your mom mainly driving you?
Yeah, it was my mom.
And so like you got an hour wait, right? And then drop you off. Would she stay up in El Paso, or would she go back home and then come back?
So that was part of our daily life, was listening on the radio to see how the line was. So sometimes if it was like, okay, today's going to be a good day, there's not much traffic, she would go back. She would prepare dinner, do whatever she had to do, and then she would drive back. And there's actually a funny story about that. Not knowing American holidays, I must have been in kinder or first grade, and my dad dropped me off that day. So normally it's mom, but dad tries to help out, and then of course he drops me off, and it was an American holiday, and we didn't know. We had no idea, and I guess he didn't realize.
They don't celebrate Memorial Day in Mexico.
No. So my dad goes and he's, I'm gonna do what I'm told to do. So I'm gonna drop off Jessica at school today. And he must have not realized there were no other cars. So he drops me off, leaves me there. The school was closed. And it was a tiny little school, but it was outdoors. So I remember I banged on the door of the principal's office and nobody was answering. And finally the janitor opens the door and he called my mom. It took her 2 hours to get to where I was. She'll tell the story today. She says, my heart just dropped to my stomach and she couldn't get there fast enough, but she was in Juárez. So she could have just,
couldn't go to the front of the line and say, hey, let me through.
Right. Yeah. So it's a funny story. We still give my dad trouble about it.
And so, I've heard about Juárez, and it has kind of a reputation, a little bit of a tough place.
Yeah.
How did you see any of that growing up, or did you have a sense of that, or, how did it impact your family, if at all?
Yeah, I definitely had a sense of it. So when I lived in Juárez before coming to the United States in 5th grade, my dad was a prominent architect. And so he designed a lot of the houses for some of the richest families in Juárez. And unfortunately, some of the richest families in Juárez, are tied to drug cartels and drugs. And my dad didn't have involvement in that. But, once you start dealing with those people, then you're just involved, I guess. So, there were times when he had to deal with, litigation. And that's actually what led us to flee to El Paso. And I say flee because I was in 5th grade and my mom picked me up from school one day and she said, we're living in the United States now. And we moved from our, country club, 6-bedroom house in Juárez, where our backyard was just a huge, boulder wall. It was, I don't know how many feet, at least 20 feet. And it had barbed wire on top and glass. And I wasn't allowed to ever go outside. There was a park right in front, but I was never allowed to go out to the park. Everything happened indoors. And so we had a play set, and I remember chasing butterflies in my backyard, but never allowed to go outside. So when we ultimately came to the United States, it was because, one of these clients told my dad, I want you to be my exclusive architect, and I have these plans, and you can't say no to them, right? And so that definitely, later on, I understood that that's the reason why we came to the United States. I do remember driving under a bridge once, and I did see, bodies. I remember crossing, because it takes forever to cross the bridge, the border by car. So sometimes you just walk across. It's a lot faster. I remember walking across and, seeing the soldiers, and then this man was carrying, I think it was like a bazooka or some big weapon, just putting it in the back of the truck. So things like that back then didn't really faze me. And now I kind of think of them and I'm like, wow, that's my daughter, hopefully, knock on wood, will never have to see things like that. Once we moved to El Paso, later on, we actually had to have family stay with us because same thing, my uncle was fleeing, and he was a politician though. So, it's dangerous in and of itself. And we got threats at my house, things like that, because he was staying with us. So I definitely experienced a lot of it. But thankfully, my parents were always protective. We always kept strong in our faith, and ultimately, didn't affect me long term, I would say.
Now, your dad, something special about him is that he actually painted the mural that we have here in our podcast room. We can kind of see part of it behind me. We're going to have him in to kind of walk us through that. And so he's an architect in Mexico.
Yes.
And then he has to flee because he's kind of getting heavied by these, people that you don't want to say no to. Mm-hmm. And then when did he become an artist?
Well, he got licensed as an architect, and then my dad is a free spirit. So he was an architect when he was way younger, but then he decided, I want to travel through Italy for a couple of years. So he kind of backpacked through Italy. And my dad is the kind of man who could sleep wherever. He doesn't have any material possessions that he cares about. So he backpacked through Italy and taught himself art. Although there's stories that supposedly his grandma and some other people in our family are just artistic. So backpacked through Italy, then he came back for a cousin's wedding, met my mom, and then he ended up staying. So he pursued his architecture career. Once we moved to El Paso, he couldn't be a licensed architect and he was illegal. He couldn't work. So he started picking up odd jobs, and one of which was painting murals. And that's kind of how his mural career, if you want to call it that, took off. So he would do that. He would do like faux finishes on houses. He also placed a lot of cantera stone. So it's very heavy stone, kind of like that Tuscany look.
Right.
So for, facades and houses. But it all started once we came to El Paso, and he had no other options for work.
And so you come up here or over to El Paso in 5th grade.
Yeah.
Like how was, junior high school, how was that all for you?
So luckily, like I said, I feel like I was sheltered in a way, but I think a lot of it had to do with just my parents and their support. I don't know why I was so motivated. I just always remember when my parents would tell me, and my mom would always say, we came to El Paso to give you a better life. So you want to repay us back, you just need to be better than us. You need to be better than us. You need to, take advantage of the opportunities we're giving you. So I was always super motivated. And I think it was just out of a sense of duty to my parents and being taught, you need to be grateful. So how do I show gratitude to my parents? I need to be a good student, do well. And I became very involved. So I was a missionary. I went missionarying in Mexico to some of the poorest communities. I saw, hunger and starvation and like I'd never seen before. Even living in El Paso, which is very different from San Diego, the border, in El Paso and Juárez, there's a highway and a river that separates the two. So it's not like here in San Diego where it's kind of far away. Right. There you're living right next to each other. So I could see the cardboard houses because the part of Ciudad Juárez that's the closest to El Paso is called Anapra. And that's where the poorest people in Ciudad Juárez live. Well, when I went missionary it was people who were poorer than that. So people who hadn't eaten in days, little kids with their blown up bellies. So I just became super involved and motivated. I think that was definitely a very important experience. And then I became active with LULAC, so it's the League of United Latin American Citizens. And it's an organization that also promotes Latinos through a wide variety of community events. And that became super important to me. I participated in a pageant, and I was the youngest participant, but I won the pageant that year. It's called Fiesta de las Flores. So I was...
You were a pageant queen.
I was a pageant queen.
Amazing.
It's like a local pageant in El Paso, but it meant so much to me.
Yes.
And then being around... So I went to high school at Coronado High School, which my parents, we had to move. We had to move to another part of the city so I could go to that school. And because that school had the IB program, International Baccalaureate. So then I met a bunch of students who ended up, they were into academics like me. They went to Harvard, Stanford. I was just surrounded by like-minded students. And so that was super helpful. I was involved in my church and just motivated.
Now, did you have a quinceañera?
I did.
Was it a big... Tell us about that.
It was huge. It was a quinceañera with 150 people. We had, 20 padrinos and madrinas, and you pay for the dress, and you pay for the alcohol, and you pay for this. And I had an even bigger First Holy Communion I look at the pictures and it's funny. It's a huge dress and, big thing on my head, but everything was big, right? Everything is big. Everything's a celebration. So I definitely did. And that's another thing. Even though I know now that we struggled financially after we came to the United States. We went from living, like I said, in a big country club, 6-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom apartment in a shady part of town. I wasn't really aware of it. So I'm very thankful for that because I feel that my heart wasn't hardened. I was just grateful. It was a lot of gratitude. And I'm very thankful for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, you at some point, I guess you're doing all the things your parents asked you to do. You're achieving at this high level. You're a superstar pageant queen, going on missions. And so at some point, are you looking at colleges?
Yes. So like I said, everybody else in the IB program was also looking at colleges, and it was a very competitive sort of environment. And so I applied to 15 different schools, and, I had all my applications very organized. And then I think applications maybe open up in August or September. And being, very involved in the Catholic Church, the not a pastor, but priest of our church, he told my dad, you should tell Jessica to apply to this school called Notre Dame. And I think she would do great there. So I said, okay, well, why not? And I ended up applying. That was the last school I applied to. And I applied right before the deadline. And actually, he's on the mural, and I'm sure my dad would love to talk about it. He was a great friend of Cesar Chavez, and he's a huge advocate in El Paso for immigrant rights, and he does a lot of work by the border. But anyways, he's involved with that.
He's in here?
He's in here, I'm sure.
Is he behind? Where's he at?
He's right over there, where he says,
I see him.
Tú eres mi otro yo.
Oh, okay.
So that's what he says. He would always tell us when we would go missionarying, you need to look at these children's faces and understand that they're part of us, right? They're a part of us. They belong. We're all the same people before God, before humanity. So he said he was always mentoring, and he said, Jessica has to apply to Notre Dame. So I said, okay, I applied. I ended up going to Notre Dame, and it's funny because I meet people and they always ask, where'd you go to college? And sometimes I'll say, I went to college in a school in the Midwest, and I hesitate to say Notre Dame because I had no idea that it was a football school. No idea. They made all of us sit down and watch Rudy as freshmen, and I'm just trying to understand, okay. So anyways, I ended up going there, and that was very formative in my path to becoming an attorney. I minored in international peace studies. They have the Kroc Institute there, and it's all about transformative justice. And coincidentally, USD also has the Kroc Institute as the sister school in the Midwest. So it was very important for me I learned a lot there. That's how I became first acquainted with the concept of mediation and became interested in the way that the law and politics plays a role in, tipping the scales of justice for humanity.
And so you're back there. Did you ever go to a football game while you were there?
I feel people are going to kill me when I say I went to maybe 4, and I had season tickets. It's not too bad.
That's not bad.
When you're there, you have to sit in the student section, and you have to stand the whole time.
Oh.
It's bitter cold. I mean, I was coming from sunny El Paso. Right. I was not expecting, the cold. Sometimes you stand in games where it's raining and it's maybe snowing, and the students just love it. But I have gone back now, so now I've become a much better.
You're a better fan.
I'm a better football fan for
the
sure.
Fighting Irish.
Yes.
And so at some point, do you become interested in law school and law?
Yeah. So I think, there's difference. I think I always was interested and cared a lot about justice. And I think that was because of my upbringing. So I vividly remember, because of the language barriers that my parents experienced, and because my dad was illegal in El Paso, we were deathly afraid of police officers talking to him. Or I remember one time, my dad was making payments in cash for a little truck that he had, and that was this little work truck. And we were driving in it one time, and then we had to get rid of it, and I didn't understand why. And later on, I learned that, he was making payments toward the truck, but he never asked for receipts. There was no contract. And so the guy essentially stole it, I would say, and took it back, which, not later on, it broke my heart. Back then I was just confused. Or we got burglarized once, and we didn't want to call the police because we were afraid, of my dad getting deported. So that, on top of seeing my mom, and I was constantly, I think from the age of 5, maybe, I was translating for my mom. So my mom needed help with, filing taxes. I was there advocating for her. My mom she helped all of my aunts get their citizenship. She helped my grandpa, my dad. Eventually my dad got amnesty through Clinton, but she processed all the paperwork, and I was always helping her. So I think I learned the importance of understanding the law and being informed and justice, right? To gain access to justice. And then at Notre Dame, I was inspired by professors. I had a professor, George Lopez, and he was my favorite professor. And he was an attorney, and I worked for the law school, and I met a lot of attorneys. So also taking classes, I majored in great text. And so you read, everything from Herodotus, the very first history book in the world, to, Martin Luther King's Letter in Jail. So I read the Federalist Papers, I read the Bill of Rights, and all those texts inspired me. And I think just naturally, I decided, I love reading, I love writing, I love justice. It's important to me. I think I want to be a lawyer. And once I got that idea in my head, there was...
Forget about it. No stopping.
No stopping.
That's so cool. So Professor George Lopez, I don't know, is that man still around?
Yeah, I think he's still part of the Kroc Institute. He's...
Okay.
I'll email him here and there.
All right, all you Notre Dame alum, let's get Professor Lopez. He can listen and hear about this transformative effect he had on your life.
Absolutely.
And what about this priest? What is his name?
Father Arturo Benuelas.
Is he still with us?
Absolutely. He's in El Paso.
Amazing.
Every time I go to El Paso, I try to say hi, and I don't keep in touch as much as I would like to, but my mom always keeps him informed, and, he always will send positive messages and, hey, I'm proud of you. So yeah,
maybe he'll listen to this as well. That would be cool.
Oh, I'm sure he would love to. Yeah.
Now, what about, you're a mom.
Yes.
How do you think, and tell us a little bit about your little girl and, what impact or effect that has on you as a lawyer and as a Latina leader.
So it's a loaded question. So being a mom is my favorite role in the world. I think it's the most meaningful role that I have. And my daughter, she's 10, about to be 11. Whereas I was the very quiet, introvert little girl, just doing what my parents told me, she's a complete opposite. She is loud, and she's a leader. She's strong-willed, and she calls herself a master negotiator because I ask her to do something and she's always trying to test the limits. And but I love seeing her personality. And as of recently, she started saying, she wants to be a lawyer. So it makes me extremely proud. And it definitely drives, the way that I look at the role of a Latina in the legal system. So, hopefully generations like her, right now, I try to pay it forward with law students, with, young legal professionals, because I hope that when she becomes a lawyer and she's practicing, other people will also pay it forward and help her as a young Latina attorney. But she's super driven, and her personality, she loves folklorico like me. Like I said, she's fully bilingual, no problem. And she has such a big personality that, I just want to help her achieve her dreams. And I always feel very proud when she tells people, my mom's a lawyer and she cares a lot about justice too. She's the friend who will go and stand up for her other friends. And, if she sees something unfair, she'll say, Mom, we need to sue. And she probably says it too much. We need to work on that because you can't just go around suing everybody. But she definitely is interested in the law. So I want to help pave the way for her, to have a successful and fulfilling career.
Yeah, I know her. Obviously, she comes around a lot. She's a real superstar, a big personality, and a real go-getter, attitude, really not afraid to tackle anything.
Yeah, she loves being here too. And she wants to meet everybody and network. She thinks she networks with people.
She's a good networker. I would love to get her on an early signing, to like almost like a recruit for Notre Dame. Yeah. I could sign her in like, what's she 11? She's like 5th grade or whatever. Yeah, I can get her right now.
Yeah.
So our podcast is about the intersection of law and the Latino community. And so I wonder for you, in your own personal life and experience, how does your background as a Spanish-speaking Latina really impact your work that you do here at Gomez Trial Attorneys?
Yeah, it's huge. So I'm at Gomez Trial Attorneys now, and I'm a personal injury attorney. I used to be a defense attorney. So Spanish speaking now is absolutely critical. I consider myself now, I can truly say I'm an attorney for the people, right? Now I can say I represent those who need help. I'm not representing insurance companies anymore, or different interest groups. So being able to speak Spanish, and I think more than being bilingual, being bicultural. And we have several attorneys here at GTA who aren't just bilingual, but they're bicultural. Lara Dietz, Raul Rabago. We grew up in Hispanic Latino households. And I think that's huge because, thinking about empathy and the ability to connect with our clients, it goes a long way. And empathy is so powerful, in my opinion. It's, it goes a lot further than sympathy, for example. Sympathy, I don't really like that word too much. Sometimes I think it's very related to pity. But when you have empathy for someone, you feel their pain in your own heart. And so it's come in handy. We have had clients who want to sign on, but they're grown adults, but they want to ask, get the blessing from their mom first or their grandma. And I understand that. I came from that matriarchal culture, society, where the Virgen de Guadalupe guides us. And she's on here too in the mural. But that only translates down to the family. So we believe in the Virgencita. We believe in the blessing, having the blessing of our mom, of our grandma. I actually have a candle in my office that says La Jefita, and that means the little boss woman. And so that's what a lot of us call our moms. We say here, she's La Jefita, she's the little boss mom. And I have it next to the picture of my daughters because that's the role I see myself in their life, right? So there have been clients who come in and they want to talk to the grandma, and I'll speak to her in Spanish, and they end up signing with us, or they end up, agreeing to the proposed strategy that we have for their litigation because we're able to connect with the mom. So I think it's so critical. And, there's another example. There was, I think the largest mediated settlement that I've been a part of was a gentleman who, just seeing him reminded me so much of my dad. He was this I could tell he was a laborer. He had his dark mustache and worn out hands. He was very injured in a vehicle accident. And I could tell his back was injured, and being a laborer, that's so important for him to be able to sustain himself. Well, he was here illegally, and I just remember how fearful he was every step of the way, because he just thought, I'm going to get deported. And I remember during his deposition, I defended his deposition, and we had to strategize, well, how are we going to deal with proving his lost wages, right? Because his lost wages were significantly impacted. This was a man who was working 60-hour weeks prior to being injured so he could support his family, send money back to Mexico. And how do you prove those when maybe he's using a fake name or a fake ID? Not only, I would worry, how does that come off to the other side? So is the other side not going to trust him? Is the other side going to think he's shady? So one of the most important roles for me dealing with this client was the ability for me to see past that because of my own personal experiences and really be able to portray him as who he was, a kind, hardworking, honest individual. So during his deposition, I had to make sure that I showed defense. I believe in his honor. I believe in everything he's saying. He's a righteous person. And it went great. And defense, at the end of the deposition and at the end of mediation, wanted to shake his hand and tell him, you're a wonderful human being. And he got a very, very nice result. So, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I believed so much in him. I know one of our assistants who also she started crying when she's also Mexican-American, and she started crying when she heard of the result. And it was a very nice feeling. But we all connected with him at a deeper level than just being able to translate.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What about this? We hear about having a chip on your shoulder. Did you ever have any experiences growing up as a young Latina that kind of put a chip on your shoulder?
Yes. And I worked very hard on that chip because, I don't want it, but at the same time, it definitely lights a fire under me. And there's two that stand out. I remember it was between my first and second year of law school, I already had a daughter. I was a single mom, and I had spam emailed a bunch of judges trying to get, a clerkship. And a judge in El Paso, she's a Latina, Harvard law school grad, single mom as well. She took the California bar exam, because she's licensed California and Texas, took the bar exam pregnant, passed it. She's an amazing woman. Judge Maria Sanchez Mendoza, and I keep in close touch with her.
Maybe we can get her on one day.
Oh, she would love to. She's a judge, and she's a huge advocate, travels all over the country. She invited me. She said, I'll give you a clerkship. Sure, why not? So I started clerking for her. And so I was sitting in her courtroom, and she was going through, it was a criminal docket. And there's attorney, kind of a smart man. He comes and he's like, oh, well, tell me a little bit about you. And I'm just talking to him. And I don't know if he was trying to be funny, but he said, well, he's like, there's no way, let me repeat that you're going to be able to be a mom, get married, have a husband, take care of your husband, and be a successful lawyer. That's impossible. Nobody can do it. So that stuck with me, and I think I tend to be more curious than angry when people say things like that. But then I think a lot about them, and then I start getting, worked up sometimes. So that was definitely something that stuck with me. And my response is always, okay, well, I'm stubborn as heck. I'm a Taurus, like you. Yeah. So okay, let me show you, right? Another example is, a white female from San Diego, and this was a few years ago, so it's recent, made a comment and said, yeah, well, Latinas, they just want to get pregnant and have babies. And it's ironic because that woman was actually maybe a high school or college dropout and stay at home. And there's nothing wrong with being a stay at home. I respect stay at home moms. I think it's very difficult, but it was just ironic, that she was speaking ill about someone who went to Notre Dame, had her law degree, was successfully juggling being a mom. And so I was like, why tear me down because I'm Latina? Or why throw that in there?
Right.
So little things like that definitely just make me want to prove everybody wrong. And they light a fire and, does give me a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. But I think it serves my clients well.
For sure. I've seen it. And so I know that you are active. You're on the board of directors for La Raza Lawyers here in San Diego, which is really an advocacy, group to promote Latinos in law and I think, justice in the community.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about, your role there, the importance of that organization to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So La Raza Lawyers Association is an organization that aims to promote Latinos through not only legal advocacy, but also political activity. And it's so important to me, as a law student, La Raza, so the scholarship fund gave me scholarships. So that's kind of how it all started. I heard about, you can get a scholarship through La Raza. So I said, okay, I need to apply. Let me learn more about the organization. I applied. And at one point, I remember there were actually 2 years where I got scholarships. I was just praying, please, help me win the scholarship. I need it to pay the rent, pay bills. It was that desperate of times. And, to take it a step further, when I received the scholarship and I went to the big event, it's called the gala event, which is October 18th this year, by the way.
Let's go October 18th. Everyone buy your tickets.
Yep. I went to the event and just met so many people. And that's why I've learned the importance truly of paying it forward, because I met people who took an interest in helping me simply because they believe in the importance of helping young Latino leaders, grow their career. And two individuals in particular, Sergio Feria and Nadia Bermudez, sometimes I would tell my mom and say, they're angels sent from God, because I don't know why they care so much about me. I don't know why they take the time to guide me. I don't know why they take the time to have coffee with me, promote me. So I'm very, very thankful. So number one, it's super important because it's a place where young Latino law school students, young Latino attorneys can turn to and meet people who truly want to see them rise. And that's very important. And I'm happy to say that, back then I was a student hoping for a scholarship. This year, I'm the president of the scholarship fund. I'm putting together the big gala event. I'm working behind the scenes to make sure it happens so we can raise money and continue to help students. Last year, we had a record-breaking scholarship donations. This year, we just donated $30,000 in bar stipends. So that's a big scholarship. It's a lot. Where it started off with $3,000. Oh, wow. So, just being a part of that means so much to me. And it's so important. It's important because we need to promote Latino lawyers so that, the demographics of Latino leaders in our community matches the constituents that we're helping. And I know you, John, are a big supporter. That's actually the first time I ever came across you. I remember the gala where I was awarded the scholarship. I would just hear about the Strong Gomez, and it was like the title sponsor and super big supporter, lifetime member of La Raza, and I'm just curious, well, who is this Strong Gomez? And after I got my award, I have to hurry home because I have a baby waiting for me, and it's a late event. It goes to like 10 at night. So I kind of left early, and you were sitting in a chair, and I just remember looking and thinking, oh, wow, that's Strong Gomez. It's the real, but I was too shy to go say hi.
How'd my suit look?
You were wearing your pinstripe suit. Okay, it was black with white pinstripes. You were looking sharp, as always. And I just remember being inspired, motivated, and the rest is history. Sometimes I'm still in shock and in awe that I work here. So organizations like La Raza, not only do we promote justice through political and legal advocacy, but it's also a place where students can get inspired and find true important mentorship opportunities.
Well, you were just very instrumental in putting together a program entitled the Shades of Success Summit, which from what I saw was, aimed at a lot of the things that you just said, kind of giving back to this next generation. Yeah. And tell us a little bit about that day and what happened and what it meant to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a great opportunity. So the Shades of Success Summit was an event that was put on by Gomez Trial Attorneys, and I co-chaired that with my other colleague, Lara Dietz. And it was aimed at inviting law students and young attorneys in San Diego to, it was a full day panel. So we had several panels, we had guest speakers, we had DA Summer Steffen join us, and she was a keynote speaker. She talked about her experience coming from a family of immigrants. And it was meant to inspire and help students network with legal professionals in the community. We had speed networking, and it was a great turnout. I've actually personally received at least 10 emails of students who are on top of it. And I can see the desire that they have to just, get out there and do what they're supposed to do to get more opportunities. And I have coffee scheduled with 4 of them within the next few weeks. But yeah, we had panelists. We talked about everything from why it is that we do what we do, as attorneys, as legal professionals. We had judges speak. It was a wonderful event. It went from 8 to 8. It was an all-day thing. And just seeing so many young, passionate law students and young lawyers wanting opportunities and wanting to get to know other like-minded individuals so they can look up to, so they can seek out for mentorship, meant a lot to me. And so I'm more than happy to, have coffee with them and talk to them and mentor them. And once again, to me, it's how I show gratitude to those who did the same for me in the past, and how I hope to, pay it forward and hopefully good karma along the way. Someone will do the same for my daughter. And then we can all just help each other and create a more equitable legal society in San Diego and then across the board.
And so, we know that Latinos are underrepresented as lawyers, in a state like California, or Texas, or, we go nationally, there's Hispanic populations all over the country. And we know that this Hispanic population is the fastest growing demographic in the country. How do you see that growth, affecting our kind of legal system or system of justice going forward?
Yeah, our legal system needs to adapt and change because you're right. The numbers don't match. And I think that's important because it definitely, in my opinion, creates systemic oppression. And it's not so much because some people are, just racist. Just, they don't care. They're mean, not nice people. But for the most part, I think that systemic oppression is created because of tribalism. And tribalism is the notion that you're going to feel more comfortable around people like you. So, if I have to choose between someone who looks and thinks like me and who I can relate to, I'm probably going to choose them, have a bias, unconscious bias, to favor them. And that's important because, honestly, if the majority of attorneys, judges in our community aren't of the same culture as, minorities, then more opportunities are going to be given to people who aren't minority. And that creates unfairness and that creates disparity. And so I think that in order to help, get rid of systemic oppression, it's important for us to be fairly represented. And I think that's why organizations like LULAC, like La Raza, are so important, because we do need Latinos and other minorities in positions of, I don't want to say power, but in, positions where they can help others, because that's the whole point. It's all about paying it forward and helping generations after. So I think it's incredibly important for us to recognize that and for us to actively combat that, to help the numbers, even out, so we can have more equality in our legal system.
Amen. And I'm hopeful that, this podcast and some of the conversations that we have and the connections we make with leaders will help, accelerate that, pacing that change. And so what's on the agenda for you next, 10 years as, one of our nation's, leading Latina trial lawyers and justice leaders? What do you hope to be doing in the coming years?
It's funny. I thought about this, and I don't want to say much will change. And I'm glad that I can say that. I don't think much will change in terms of me saying, well, I want to move here or move there. I'm happy. I'm happy being an attorney for the people. I'm happy being a trial attorney. Eventually, I want to grow in my trial litigation skills. But the most important thing to me, and where I want to see myself in 10 years, is making even a bigger impact on my community. I want to grow my reputation within the community and be known as someone who, has helped others, has helped students, but at the same time with a great reputation as a great trial attorney like you, John. So I just want to keep learning. I want to keep learning from you. I want to keep learning from other mentors in Raza, in the legal community who I admire. And I just want to make a name for myself in the community.
Well, you're well on your way. I think a lot of folks out there know who you are and really look up to you and are grateful to you. So this is episode 1. We got a whole bunch of podcasts coming up. Like, what can our guests look forward to in future episodes of the Latino?
Well, definitely amazing guest speakers. So, John and I were talking earlier, and you have great ideas. I think we'll talk more about how being, having the ability to connect with our Latino, Hispanic clients definitely impacts our cases. An interesting case here or there is always fun to listen about. And just stay tuned. We'll learn more about who the attorneys are, who these guest speakers are, who doesn't like a little bit of good cheeseman. So
everybody likes that.
Everybody loves cheeseman.
I love it. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. And so, Jessica, you're going to be on a whole bunch more of these episodes. But if people want to look you up, learn more about you, are you on social media? Where can people learn more about Jessica Lujan?
Yeah, so I'm on social media, Jessica Lujan. If you follow Gomez Trial Attorneys, Get Gomez, then you'll find me. I'm always posting on there, and I'm always linked on there. I'm on Facebook, but also the website. So there's a lot of information about me. There's a video, and I think you did a really good job of in our website. And every attorney has a little blurb where people can go and look them up and get to know more about the attorneys.
I love it.
Yeah.
And so just let's have a little preview, a brief preview of our next guest, a very special guest, and what this guest is going to talk about.
So John was nice enough. He's going to invite my father, who painted the mural. His name is Raza Lujan, to come and speak with us. And what can I tell you about my dad? He's just a kind, happy individual. He's extremely talented. I know this mural means so much to him. He was very, very honored that you gave him the opportunity to put this mural together because it has so many symbols that are important to him and us, and us growing up cross-culturally. So he's a deacon in the Catholic Church, but he's a muralist, and I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy hearing from him. He's funny, and he's just very endearing.
Yeah, it's going to be super cool and a special, I think, day certainly for me, I'm sure for you as a proud daughter. But thank you so much for being our guest. Look forward to a ton of cool episodes in the future. And really, the goal of this podcast, like you said, is to, make justice more fair for Latinos in our country. And so we're going to be working on that. And I'm really honored that you're going to be my partner in that.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Latino podcast. We'll see you again next time. And be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.